Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Easton. I'm Christina Drostin. We will begin our service by singing Spirit of Life, which is hymn number 123 in the gray hymnal. Please rise. We would now like to welcome Rob Todd, who will share with us the board announcements.
Good morning. My name is Rob, I'm a member of the board, and I am here with board announcements. Liz reminded me or asked me to let everyone know, if you don't already, that next week is RE Sunday, and she says it will be a show not to miss. And then $500 was collected for the outreach collection for BAM, the Building African American Minds. So thank you to everyone who contributed. The Strategic Plan Committee, aka our visionary roadmap to guide us through these next 3 years. If you haven't reviewed it yet, we welcome your thoughts and feedback. Please email that to Dick and Christina today before they finalize this plan this week. And that's it. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome again. I am Emily Cranwell, and I am helping Christina Drostin this morning lead today's service. I wanted to start this morning with words of welcome from Monica Jacobson Tennyson. Welcome. What you bring, who you are, enriches us all. We say welcome to your joy, your hope, your pride. We say welcome to your grief, your fear, your anger, and the parts of you that are not yet ready to be seen and heard. Welcome to them as well. For we are a people of faith, faith in our expansive welcome, faith in our ability to grow, faith in the precious gift of our truths, faith in the promise of trying, learning, changing. Faith in our capacity to know ourselves and each other ever deeply. We welcome you who are gay, straight, bi, pan, lesbian, queer, questioning, unable to be contained in any word. Welcome to you who are trans, cis, genderqueer, non-binary, intersex, agender, beyond words. Welcome to you who are human. Welcome to you who are loved and love. Welcome to you who are blessed, which is all of you. May this time together be a blessing. I'm going to ask Christina to light our chalice for us as I share the words, A Fire in the Universe by Sean Trapp. Our chalice reminds us of that fire within ourselves is the same fire that illuminates the universe. It is our reminder that all is connected, even though the space of the void is vast, and our experience here is but a blip in the cosmic timeline. Our flame is a promise that in our smallness and our short time on this earth, that we live intently and deeply, with love for one another, with honesty and integrity, to be guided by rational thought and critical thinking, and a sense of shared responsibility. For as the late astronomer Carl Sagan reminds us, this pale blue dot is the only home we've ever known. If you would rise as you are able to join us in the singing of 1008 in the teal hymnal, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
Thank you.
Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Easton, we seek to nurture spiritual and intellectual growth for all ages, and to be actively involved in community outreach and service, cherishing diversity and celebrating our oneness with all humanity. We covenant to support each other in the spirit of compassion, respect, and love. Thank you. For those of you following along in the order of service, we are going to skip over the guided meditation for now, but there will be an element of meditation incorporated into our sermon. Which brings us to the time in our service when we share that which is on our hearts. We welcome you to come forward and share with us a joy or a sorrow. Please tell us your name, and please use this mic, and we will also check the chat for those of you at home who might like to share their joy or sorrow. I'll light the first candle this week for really just the many in our world who are hurting, victims of gun violence, and those who are struggling with ongoing crisis around the world. I will light a final candle and ask that we just take a moment to hold what we have heard and that which has not been spoken. For those joys and sorrows that have been shared and those that remain in the sanctuary of our hearts, we are grateful. I remind us now of that form of love we call generosity, with the words of Paul R. Beadle. Once upon a time, most folks used the offering plate to fulfill their pledges of financial support. Nowadays, lots of folks click on their church websites or set up automatic transfers from their checking accounts. Some still write a monthly check paying their church bill along with all the others. But passing the offering plate was never just a practical exercise. It has always been a ritual. Even if your pledge is paid up, it is worthwhile for you to bring even just $1 to drop into the plate as a ritual reminder of that form of love we call generosity. Let it be a reminder that after meeting our obligations to ourselves and our households and our communities to which we belong and are committed, we must still keep our capacity to give. The practice of giving until it is second nature and first response helps bring forth the realm of love. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Thank you, and I would like to now welcome Ellen to the microphone as she shares our reading for today.
Good morning. When Christina and I were looking for hymns for this morning, we found the one I just played, which is 1052 in the Teal hymnal. But since it's unfamiliar, we decided that rather than singing it, it would make a good reading, and then I would play it so that you could hear what the melody sounds like for the next time we do it, when we will sing it. So I'll be reading verses 1 and 3. Far beyond the grasp of hands, or light to meet the eye, past the reaches of the mind, there, find the key to nature's harmony, in an architecture so entwined. Like the birds whose patterns grace the sky and carry all who join in love expanding, the message of peace will rise in flight, taking the weight of the world upon its wings, in the oneness of everything. Still, we seek to find a truth that we might understand and reduce to terms defined. Vast and immeasurable time and space, all so overwhelmingly designed. Oh, passing years, just might I know the faith that winters in the heart, to be reborn in spring. To hear and to feel the pulse of life enters my soul as a song to sing, of the oneness of everything.
I'm happy to join you this morning. I hope to present some food for thought related to the binary framework that we often employ in our lives. What do I mean by binary thinking? Please raise your hand with some examples. Anne?
Black and white.
Black and white. Gail?
Boy, girl.
Boy, girl.
Polarized politics.
Polarized politics. Democrat, Republican. Liberal, conservative. Hoshena.
Oh, sure.
Tall, short.
On, off.
On, off.
Gay, straight.
Gay, straight.
Good and bad.
Right and wrong. Good or bad. Checked off my entire list. Thank you.
With you.
So we are talking about a dichotomy, two extremes or opposites. We've all witnessed how our country has become more polarized, particularly in the 21st century. It's hard to believe, but even whether or not one would wear a mask became a binary decision these past couple of years. Binary thinking is not only looking at two extremes, it is also a failure to see what is in the middle. This whole world is filled with shades of gray. Yet too often in our culture, we anchor ourselves to the dichotomous or binary terms to describe something without expanding our mind to realize there is often more to a situation than those two terms. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a time and place for such terms. They are perfectly accurate in many situations. I identify as a woman. I am happy to use the word woman to describe myself. Please feel free to use the word woman when referring to me. However, do we readily assume that everyone who lacks facial hair, has developed breasts, or might wear a skirt or a dress or makeup is a woman? My neighbor votes Republican. Do I readily assume that he dislikes people who are LGBTQ? Or that he does not care about helping those who live in poverty? This is where our binary thinking can lead to problems. How do we get here? Part of a young child's normal development is to develop black and white thinking. It's a normal part of developing ego, our sense of self. As adults, we retain that black and white thinking, but we are capable of adding an additional layer of understanding. We psychologically develop an understanding of many shades of gray, of the possibilities between black and white, that things aren't always clear-cut. To what degree can we adults see those grays? It varies adult to adult. I propose that sometimes our ability to only see black and white, or to just see one shade of gray, is often due to limited experiences. In other words, it's hard to think outside of the box when we don't realize that we are inside of a box. Some people have had opportunities to travel, which can foster a mindset of recognizing how many possibilities and how much diversity is out there. Others are avid readers, which lends itself to a form of travel for the mind and spirit. Some of us have had certain relationships with people who know how to blow that box wide open because of their own life experiences and outlooks. And others have not experienced any of these things and approach certain life situations in a binary framework due to a lack of recognition that gray exists in that particular setting. We will also see situations where plenty of us are aware of a non-binary framework, but we may regress to a simpler binary way of functioning. Psychologist Tony White describes how we tend to revert more to black and white thinking when facing times of stress. For example, instead of thinking about how most of us are descendants to immigrants onto this land that we call America, when facing a difficult job market, seeing first-generation immigrants here eagerly accepting jobs with grueling hours and offering minimal pay, we can easily start thinking of us versus them. Instead of expanding our thought, my family immigrated 3 generations ago because they were struggling in Ireland, and now this man has immigrated because of the struggle to feed his family in Mexico. Educator and author Dr. Clay Drinko explains that binary thinking helps us feel a sense of certainty. In times of uncertainty, binary thinking can feel comforting. When we grew alarmed about a novel virus threatening the lives of our loved ones and ourselves, we became focused on straightforward decision-making without the time or mental space to consider complexities. Don't get me wrong, decision-making during the pandemic has been anything but simple. But often our decisions took a path of, I need to do A, B, and C. Because if I skip these steps and instead do X, Y, and Z, I might become infected and die. We've been operating under unusually stressful conditions. It can take strong effort and hard work to make space for respecting others whose decisions are different from ours. During recent political stress in our country over the past decade, whether related to presidential elections or growing awareness of police violence, we have reverted as a nation to drawing a line in the sand between our opposing sides to the point that we struggle to even have discourse over our disagreements. Whether this involves the Black Lives Matter movement, or abortion rights, or banning books in school libraries, the national climate is hot with an expectation that we declare our allegiance to one side of the issue or another. Here's another example, one that involves gender identity. I identify as a woman. I talked yesterday with my friend Dick Dowdy before today's service. He explained that he identifies as a man. However, we need to remember there are many wonderful, beautiful people who identify somewhere in between. People who might claim the trans label due to sake of ease and convention, Whoever thought we would put the word trans with the word ease? A given individual may present with a female gender expression, yet identify as a male, but not feel comfortable asking us to use he/him pronouns. Or a person might transition with certain medications and dress, but not want to undergo surgery. Where do we make space in our binary thinking, or our binary thinking plus one shade of gray, which is trans, for those people? If we do not intentionally work through reflecting on our own biases and assumptions, then we will close ourselves off to seeing these people for who they truly are. And even worse, we will close them off from a safe and accepting space, which is something that we have actually committed to building for one another as UUs. This brings us to the question of, why does this matter? If someone identifies as a man, so be it. If I want to say this is a bad movie or a bad meal, so be it. Don't I have a right to that label or to that opinion? Of course we have our rights to opinions and to labeling ourselves. The problem isn't the words themselves. The problem is when I only considered, is the patient who I'm taking care of today at work healthy or sick? Is the coach for my kid's soccer team a man or a woman? Is this meal bad or good? We need to examine the rigidity and extremeness to that type of thinking. Furthermore, allowing our minds to frequently use a binary framework can be limiting and harmful. Think of the genderqueer person I described above, who has adopted the trans label due to convenience, because many of us cisgender people may only see that one shade of gray between man and woman. What if they identify as gender creative or gender fluid, or another term that I'm not even aware of? But they do not have the space to celebrate who they are in life, and they are without a witness to recognize and celebrate themselves. This may sound trivial and just a matter of semantics, but I remind ourselves of the high rates of depression, substance use, and suicide that plague our genderqueer brothers and sisters. Did you catch it? Siblings, to use a more expansive term. As futurist Bob Johansen says in his book, Full Spectrum Thinking, categories move us towards certainty, but away from clarity. Remember, this can happen in times of stress and feeling threatened, or in situations when we lack experience to realize there exist shades of gray. Therefore, when we default to binary thinking, we become stuck making assumptions. Johansen explains, being stuck in categorical thought doesn't actually involve much thinking at all. You just assume without thinking that new experiences will fit into your old boxes, buckets, labels, generalizations, and stereotypes. Let me share an example that involved a 6-year-old child who taught me about expansive thinking instead of binary thinking. As a college student, I was babysitting this child and we were playing with toy figurines. I did my best to play with spirit and gusto, and I asked, "Is this one the bad guy?" To which the child nonchalantly replied, "There aren't good or bad people, just people who make good or bad choices." I think of this turn of phrasing and labels often, even 25 years later, as I endeavor to view the world expansively. You see, when I was playing toy figurines with that child, I reverted to a very rigid, extreme framework that locked people. Okay, they were toy figurines, but it locked people into a fixed identity. Alternatively, this kid's approach helped me connect with all the people, or toy figurines, as part of humanity, and use our commonality as a foundation before then looking at the choices and actions that individuals were making. If you ask how that child at age 6 in his developmental framework knew to think beyond the binary, let's chalk that up to experience in teaching. He was being raised by two amazing people, one of whom was the dean of students at the university I attended. In her book, The Person You Mean to Be, psychologist Dr. Dolly Chu describes how many people, including herself, see ourselves as good people and want to be good people, despite sometimes taking actions that are to the contrary. She describes her commitment to fighting for equality and supporting social justice initiatives, despite sometimes not speaking up when she hears a homophobic joke, a comment or slur against immigrants, or sometimes being judgmental to people who are different than herself and not realizing that till later. In another example, she references a Washington Post article about Derek Black, who was a white nationalist for much of his life. In this article, Derek Black explained that many people in the KKK do not consider themselves to be racist. See how much easier it is for us to recognize the fault and contradiction in others? Like the fact that most of us would consider a KKK member to be racist. It's easier to identify that than calling ourselves out when we benefit from white privilege, when we use heteronormative or cisnormative language. Those terms I just used, heteronormative, cisnormative, those are words that reference when we assume that one is not LGBTQIA XYZ, to be fun and expansive, without creating open space for the other person to share their identity with us. Chu explains that, quote, through it all, we cling to an illusion of being a perfectly ethical and unbiased person, and to the idea that such a good person can exist. This illusion is problematic. We do not need to fall for this false notion. Rather, we can embrace being goodish, which is a good person who is always striving to be a better person, a true work in progress. To do that, we need to let go of the idea of being a good person in order to become a better person. Goodish people are always growing, which is why being goodish is better than being good. So where do we go from here? Instead of trying to be good people, because we recognize the limited thinking of binary terms, like only good people or bad people, how can we instead work on improving ourselves, becoming goodish? Again, I'm not saying that good and bad does not exist. It most certainly does. The argument against binary thinking is an objection to how we often use those extreme terms, either or, in situations where a deeper understanding of the shades of gray around a dichotomy, like good and bad, is often more valuable and will take us farther. Let's challenge ourselves to approach the world recognizing there are many shades of gray between these binary ends of a spectrum. Furthermore, let's work on appreciating the spectrum of diversity and beauty those shades of gray can reveal. I propose that this approach actually honors the first 3 principles of UU. Can anyone recall and share right now the first principle? I ask not because I have them all memorized, but I think it's worthwhile for us to consider memorizing them. First principle, anyone?
Comes back in the order of service.
We affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
We affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. What about the second? Lee.
Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Justice, equity, and compassion in our human relations. And number 3? David.
acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregation.
Acceptance of one another in all our shades of gray, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. How can we work to develop expansive thinking? With practice. It's not easy, we have to work at it. I'm going to share 7 steps recommended by Dr. Clay Drinko. He's a writer whose background in drama, performing arts, and education has garnered him the skills to teach others how to leave binary thinking behind and instead think outside the box. Number 1, Drinko recommends we try new things. Our world is complex and messy, not black and white. Try putting ourselves out there, try something new, like a local art class, sign up to learn a new language, travel somewhere new, pick a different book off the shelf from a different section of the library. These experiences help us expand our outlook and frame of mind. Let us recall the words from Jim Scott in today's reading in the Teal hymnal, the openness of everything. Number 2, Drinko recommends that we meet new people. Think through your daily routine, how you usually see the world in your life day to day. Now, what if we go out of our way to meet someone new or interact with someone who we usually just walk past with a smile and a nod? Or even better, strike up a conversation with someone who you've previously considered annoying. But do this with a calm and open spirit. Remember their humanity and listen. See what they have to share. The alternative, we continue with our daily routine, surrounding ourselves with friends who have the same binary assumptions that we do. Are you beginning to get a feel for this? It takes work for us to get out of our own comfort zone, to make ourselves learn because of the years we have spent settling into our current patterns and habits. Number 3, Drinko recommends that we approach life with curiosity. When we truly want to learn about others around us, listen with an open mind. Number 4, when we listen, do so deliberately, with an open mind and without pressure. Take time. Take the time to listen fully, catching yourself if you start to make snap judgments or creating conclusions before they've even finished sharing. Number 5, build empathy for others. This requires that we first listen to what another's experience is. Then we need to acknowledge that perspective as that person's truth. His example is when so many white people have looked at Black Lives Matter's protests by generalizing Black people, instead of exploring what the issue represents by listening to their various experiences. Too often, we white people analyze their experiences through our own lens instead of acknowledging their experiences for what they are, as truth. As Drinko writes, we invite gray area back into our lives when we acknowledge that just because someone's truth is different than ours, it doesn't mean it's not true. Number 6, Drinko cautions us to not fall for something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. This concept is named for 2 psychologists, Dunning and Kruger, who explain that we are at risk for using bias when we approach something as experts, when in reality, we have very limited knowledge on the matter. For example, we are all familiar with the phrases, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, or ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. Often, when we learn a tiny bit about a new subject matter, our confidence levels are high as we start to talk about it. I can recall instances when I've excitedly talked about something new that I heard about on NPR. The trick is to take that excitement and interest forward with curiosity, not with confidence, and accidentally carrying expertise on the matter. As Drinko explains, The more people learn, the less confident we actually become, because you begin to realize that it's more complex than we initially realized. Once someone starts to actually become an expert in a field, confidence finally starts to gradually increase again. And number 7, lastly, he recommends that we embrace uncertainty to help ourselves learn and grow. Embrace uncertainty. When we acknowledge the complexity of the world, of life, and truly appreciating others around us, we recognize and celebrate that uncertainty is inherent in this world. An example that comes to mind is the challenge I hear many people voice when using the pronouns they, them, which is what some people prefer for their own gender expression and gender identity. I've heard so many of us say, I just can't get my mind to go there. Or, but it's not correct grammatically. Can't they pick a different term? To that, I would like to point out, listen to our words. I can't. Yes, you can. Isn't that what we tell our youth all the time when they try something new and struggle? Keep trying. Work on it. Who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks? It just takes work and time. And it isn't the bit more work that we would put into helping our brains. And that little bit of more work that we would put into helping our brains open up to those shades of gray that exist in gender expression and pronouns, and God forbid the use of they, them, that is so little compared to the work, time, and energy that John Doe standing in front of us puts into expressing themselves in their daily lives in this difficult world that can be filled with way too much hate. The people I see request to use a gender pronoun that is different than what our assumptions might have assigned them when we walked into a room are people who struggle, work so hard against bias, fear, and hate every day of their lives to be true to themselves. The least we can do is to use a pronoun with respect and love for their preference and who they are. Listen to our words. It's not grammatically correct. Can we bend a little here? I know, I'm talking to some teachers. I was raised by one, I get it. I love the English language. This is not a request to throw out every tenet of the English language. Rather, it's asking that the English language, our brains, the U.S. Constitution, or the Bible, grow and evolve. Keep the spirit of the language. Let's use it expansively to truly give room for us to honor people and their identity. I throw in the references to the U.S. Constitution and the Bible because I recall when Michelle and I decided to get married 20 years ago. It's the 20th year. We should go somewhere. It was not legal, but we knew we were getting married to each other. We had hopes that someday the law would evolve and catch up with us. Similarly, I hope someday the English language and the grammar books will catch up for a genderqueer individual who has the courage and strength to stand up and ask that we honor their identity and their preferred pronoun of they, them. So work on it, practice with someone else so that we can help use that for them in respect when we are in their presence. In closing, I'd like to share a concept discussed in John White's book, What is Enlightenment? Exploring the Goal of the Spiritual Path. He explains how many spiritual scholars consider that as human evolution enters a new phase, it will be characterized by transcendence of ego and recognition of the unity of all life. And this takes us to many aspects of Buddhism and a number of other faith and spiritual beliefs as we work of letting go of that ego and self and recognize our connection and part of the greater whole. It's, I think, another one of those review principles that we should memorize. We will let go of binary thinking. We will embrace an expansive frame of thought that allows us to explore and celebrate the shades of gray, along with the ends of the spectra that color this wonderful world. Thank you.
So I think maybe just one of the English verses makes sense, and then the Spanish verse. So 305.
Our closing hymn is 305, which is De Colores.
And maybe you can say through the Spanish.
And we are going to do one verse in English.
The third verse, I think, would be the one to do.
Lay it out one more time, please, Ellen.
Third verse,
In
English, and then the Spanish verse.
and then the Spanish.
If you could, maybe.
Got it. Okay, so on page 305, now I see it. So we've got verse 3, which we will read, we will sing in English, and then Spanish, we will do the final verse there. And I'll just say a few of the phrases, if that's helpful for people who studied German. Or French, where you pronounce half the word. Okay, de colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajaritos que vienen de afuera. De colores es el arco iris que vemos lucir. I think you get the hang of it, but we're not recording anybody, so, well, actually, we're all being recorded. All right, Ellen, it's all yours.
Okay. So I know I caught everybody off guard when I just played the intro on the first hymn. So I'm telling you now, I'm going to play that thing that reads interlude at the end as your introduction. Okay? Possible, from all the volunteers to the music and people who coordinated things behind the scenes. And we now may go forth in the certainty or lack of certainty that we carry exploring and learning about our faith in the knowledge of love and in the vision of hope.
And in our going, may we be blessed with all good things. May we take with us the fire that burns deep within us. Let it reflect the human spirit touched by the mystery of life in reading, compassion, community, justice, faith, and love.